And when we get into ball games and you watch ball games, everybody stands and does the national anthem. I'll bet you 90% of the people that do that at the ball games have no idea where the national anthem even came from. And it came from, and we'll talk about this later, you don't have to write this down until I tell you, it came from a battle of the War of 1812 called the Battle of Baltimore at Fort McHenry. And that's where the whole thing came from, and I think it's an important thing in American history, and I think very few people really have a clue of what they are singing or where it's coming from. So we're going to spend some time talking about the War of 1812. We also are going to spend some time talking about how the Star-Spangled Banner came about, and we're also going to show you a really good video on the Star-Spangled Banner. And you know what do anybody know what the Star-Spangled Banner is, other than a song? It's a big flag. Yeah, it's a flag that was flown over Fort McHenry during the Battle of Baltimore. And that original flag, in its essence, is at the National American History Museum in Washington, D.C. on display. And it's huge, but it's been tattered. There's reasons for that. It's a really big deal. The picture I gave you of the makeshift rocket that we'll be talking about, that is an original Congreve rocket that was used during this period of time, that was in the American History Museum behind bulletproof glass. And I shouldn't tell you this, but you're really not supposed to take pictures, but I just had to. Yeah.
I was going to ask if you took that.
I did, and you weren't supposed to. So, but I mean, because they don't want everybody in there taking pictures with flash. But I turned my flash off and took a picture because it's a pretty unique piece of history, a Congreve rocket. And we'll talk about that down the line. Well, I just want to start a little bit before we get to our first subtopic, so you really don't have to write anything, just listen for a minute. Now, remember, we've been in conflict with Great Britain back and forth and whatever, and now we just can't seem to keep ourselves out of war. Even though they suspend the orders in council, we don't get the word and we declare war on Great Britain. So we're going to fight them again in a very short period of time. We just fought them in 1776, 77, 78, 79, 80, and now we're right back at it again, 20 years later. Now, this mainly was initiated by Great Britain. I gave you some reasons why we thought it'd be great, including hunger for land, American national pride, the impressment of our 7,000 sailors, freedom of the seas, whatever. But the bottom line was Britain kind of initiated this, and they had a strategy concerning this upcoming war with America. They weren't interested in beating us in battle and taking the colonies back. I think I told you that. They weren't interested in that. That wasn't what they were trying to do. They simply wanted to assure that they let the United States of America know who was boss, and that we would never, ever, ever go to war with them again, would never declare war on them again, have the audacity of gall to declare war on them. So that's kind of what their idea was. The victory over the Americans in the War of 1812 for Britain is just going to simply mean that the United States is going to be at the mercy of Great Britain forever, concerning trade and all these kind of things. That was their idea. They did not want to, I want to re-emphasize, they did not want to re-secure the American colonies and have them be British. They weren't interested in that. They kind of wanted to teach us a lesson, and they kind of wanted to make it very clear that from this point on in history, you're going to be at our beck and call. That was their thought process, okay? So with that said, we will go to our first subtopic, which is an unprepared American military. An unprepared American military. You should understand this, because one of the things Thomas Jefferson did when he took over the presidency is he did what? Cut funding to both the American military, the Navy and the Army, right? And shortened us down. So we didn't have a very good armed services at the time. So remember, after taking office, President Jefferson recommended to Congress to reduce the American military, which left the United States very unprepared for war. And I'm going to give you 4 examples of the unpreparedness on the part of the United States military. 4 reasons why we were unprepared to go to war with Great Britain, even though we made the decision to declare war. 4 examples of the unpreparedness on the part of the United States military. Anybody want to guess how many ships the United States Navy had at this time?
400.
What? What'd you say? What'd you say over here?
400.
What?
400.
400. Did you say 1,500? Well, I mean, okay, you didn't. Maybe it was right. What do you think? You know how many they had? 20.
20.
they had 20 ships available. You know how many the British had?
1,500.
Over 1,000. So right away we're at a huge disadvantage, and there is our first example of how unprepared we were to fight this war. We had 20 naval ships in our entire arsenal. They had over 1,000. Not good. Okay, United States Navy had a total of 20 ships compared to the 1,000 ships the British had in their Navy. Second example is the British had tens of thousands of soldiers available to fight. Tens of thousands. British had tens of thousands. I don't know the exact number, but 20, 30, 40, 50, 60,000. Tens of thousands of soldiers ready to go. You know how many we had? 7,000. So we have 7,000 total troops. That's it. That are ready to go to war. They have tens of thousands of troops at their disposal. Now the third reason has to do with the second. We have not only have only 7,000 troops available, the commanders of those troops are elderly Revolutionary War veterans. So they're old guys that aren't in any physical shape to fight or lead troops. So we have a 7,000 man military, but the commanders of those military are elderly Revolutionary War veterans, guys that fought in the Revolutionary War. So if you fought in 1775 or 1776 and you were a commander and you were 40, 86, 96, 1806, 30 years later you're in your 70s, okay? So they had elderly commanders, which was not good, leading those particular troops. Now, on the football team, Jamie, what do the coaches pick? I don't know if they pick them for the year, or pick them weekly, or what do you get picked as, maybe to be, the leader of the team? Okay, they pick captains. Well, really, if you want to have an overall commander, or I kind of gave it away. If you want to have one overall leader, the head coach is the leader of the football team. They're the overall commander. Okay, it wouldn't work very well if you had 6 different head coaches, right? Telling you what to do, 6 different things. The last thing that they did that made us very unprepared for war is President Madison did not appoint an overall commander of American forces. They had no one at the top, no one to answer to final. So the 4 disadvantages that the American military had in this war with Great Britain is 1, the United States Navy had a total of 20 ships. The British had over 1,000. Number 2, the United States Army had less than 7,000 troops available. The British had tens of thousands. Number 3, most of the commanders of the American military were elderly Revolutionary War veterans. And finally, President Madison failed to appoint an overall commander to direct the war effort. Okay? Now, if you don't have an overall commander, what do your troops end up being? Poorly trained, poorly equipped, and poorly battle ready. Okay? So we're in a world of hurt. World of hurt. And so can you imagine early in 1812, in this War of 1812, we're going to get thrown around a little bit, aren't we? Okay, we're going to. Which takes us to our next subtopic, and this might surprise you, early disasters at the nation's capital. Early disasters at the nation's capital. Early disasters at the nation's capital. Now, in August of 1814, just 6 miles from Washington, D.C., the British Army is marching toward an unguarded capital. Okay? In August of 1814, just 6 miles from Washington, D.C., the British Army is marching toward an unguarded capital. Anybody want to guess how many soldiers they had marching towards our capital?
15,000.
30,000. 30,000, good guess. 30,000 soldiers are marching. They're 6 miles from the nation's capital in August of 1814. We know they're coming, and we try to get out there and stop them, and some military soldiers and some militia engage the British as they're marching to Washington, D.C., but the Americans are very quickly overrun. So the Americans know they're coming. They know these 30,000 British troops are marching towards the capital, and they go out there to engage them. This would be American Army and militia, but are soon overrun. So the British continue to march towards our capital. Well, what do you think the residents of Washington, D.C. do when they very good, they evacuate the city, they get the heck out of there. Because there's nothing between Washington, D.C. and those British soldiers once they overrun these American soldiers and militia. So people in Washington get the word of this and they begin to evacuate the city. And the British soldiers pour into Washington, D.C. and they destroy several public buildings. So these British soldiers, 30,000 strong, are going to pour into Washington, D.C. in August of 1814 and start doing serious damage on many public buildings in the nation's capital. And the new weapon they used in their assaults was something called, it's on your ID sheet, the Congreve rocket. And you have a picture of that straight from the National American History Museum. An original Congreve rocket from this period of time. So the British are using new weaponry in their assault of the nation's capital. They're using what's called the Congreve rocket. Now, you look at that and you've seen it, I handed it to you. What's it look like?
Here, fine.
Looks like a
Firework.
fire
Bottle rocket.
Kind of, what'd you say? You guys are close. It was basically a pipe bomb on a bamboo stick. Take a look at it. That's basically what it was. Okay? So this rocket was virtually a modern day pipe bomb on a stick of bamboo. It was actually made from iron tubes. It had a nose, a cone nose, as you can see. And they varied. Some weighed 3 pounds. Some weighed as much as 32 pounds. Obviously the bigger ones had what? More power, more bang for their buck. So this Congreve rocket was virtually a modern day pipe bomb on a stick of bamboo. And the Congreve rocket was made from iron tubes. Obviously what it had inside of it, gunpowder. And it had a cone nose like a rocket. And they weighed anywhere from 3 pounds to 32 pounds. Now, their range was remarkable. Their range was between 1,000 yards and 2 miles. They could light these on fire and ship them up in the air, and they could go, some of them, as far as 2 miles. So from 1,000 yards to 2 miles. And they would go, and what would they do as soon as they hit, when that cone hit? Blow up. Okay, these were Congreve rockets. The range of these rockets was approximately 1,000 yards up to 2 miles, and they would explode upon contact. That was the idea. They're a pipe bomb full of gunpowder. Yeah.
Were they like very accurate?
Well, we'll talk about that. That's a good question.
Or were they just kind of like, well, maybe-
We'll talk. No, we'll talk about that. That's interesting to say that. Now, and Brady's all over it. Because of their lack of accuracy, their main cause is to start fires and raise havoc, not blow anything up. You know what raise havoc means? Put people in disarray, get them to panic, get them to flee, get them to go, oh my God, panic and run off. Okay? And then they want to start something on fire. It worked pretty good, because if you shot that at something that would start on fire, it would blow up and start it on fire. So because of the lack of accuracy with the Congreve rocket, the main use would be to start fires and simply raise havoc. Yep. Yeah, we're going to get to that, other girl. The rocket was the brainchild of British inventor Sir William Congreve. The rocket was the brainchild of a British inventor by the name of Sir William Congreve. Now, I mentioned earlier that they being the British, attacked and destroyed several public buildings in Washington, D.C. I'm going to give you the 4 most important. Okay, you might be surprised that the British would come in here and have the gall or audacity to attack these buildings. First of all, the Capitol building was being constructed. In other words, it wasn't done, it was unfinished. They set that on fire, the whole building. If you go there today and take a tour of the Capitol, you can still see the burn marks on the concrete from 1812, actually in this case 1814, on the walls. So first of all, they set the unfinished Capitol building on fire. And some of it was concrete, and so like I said, you go there today and they'll take you on a tour and they'll show you burn marks on the concrete from those particular Congreve rockets during the War of 1812 in August of 1814. They also set the Treasury building on fire. They set the Treasury building on fire. Those buggers even set the Library of Congress on fire. Cody, what'd they use to burn it up? The books in the library. They set the library on fire using the books from the Library of Congress. Because about 3,000 books were destroyed and used to fuel the fire. About 3,000. Whose books were those? Everybody's, right? How do we replace those books? Anybody know?
Very careful.
What?
Very
Well, maybe. How did we replace those books? Anybody know? Let's talk a little bit about that. We're a little off that. We bought somebody's personal library to try to refinish the Library of Congress. Anybody know whose library we purchased? Thomas Jefferson. That's exactly right. Did he have every single book that was in there? Okay, we'll get into that story later. Okay, but anyway, they bought Thomas Jefferson's books. What other important building did they assault?
Washington Monument.
That wasn't quite ready yet. The White House. They even assaulted the White House. Now this is kind of an interesting story, because who is the President of the United States right now? James Madison. Well, his wife, Dolly Madison, had set up a meal for 40 people. Already set it up. It was something she had pre-planned. And these British soldiers invaded the White House and actually sat down and enjoyed that meal that she had set up for guests for 40 people. Sat there and ate the meal. Now, this is kind of interesting because the First Lady had earlier evacuated and left the food on the table once she heard they were coming, and she took one thing with her. She took a very important painting of George Washington with her because she did not want that to fall into the British hands or be destroyed. So she basically leaves the meal for 40 there, grabs this painting of George Washington that she does not want the British to either possess or ruin, and evacuates. Now, why was it important she got out of there before the British did, Shayla? Why do you think that was important she got out of there before the British got there? Shayla? Well, maybe, you're close. We were lucky she did not get killed, but she didn't get taken, captured, because what would they have done? Well, they would certainly put her, this was their plan. They weren't going to hold her for ransom, or they weren't going to have us do anything. Their plan was to put her in a cage back in England and display her for people to see, to embarrass the American government. So if she would have been caught, they wouldn't have killed her. They would have captured her, but they wouldn't have captured her for ransom. Their plan was, according to historians, that they would have placed her in a cage and put her back in display back in London. Oh, you probably should know something about that, yeah. Well, so the First Lady evacuates. She takes a very important painting of George Washington with her. Historians emphasize the importance of her evacuation because if she was caught, they would have placed her in a cage and put her on display back in London, England. So after the soldiers get there, they feed themselves on Mrs. Madison's meal. They ransack the White House and set it on fire. And in the White House, you can still see burn marks from the attempted burning of the White House. And they did a good job because by the time they got done in the White House, all you could see was the shell of the White House. The inside had been totally gutted out. Okay, so the British came in, attacked our nation's capital building, burnt our treasury building. What else? Burnt the Library of Congress up, used their own books to do it, attacked the White House, fed on Dolly Madison's great dinner she had set there, ransacked the White House, set it on fire. So we're not doing so well early, are we here? We gotta come up with something. Now, if you're the American government or even American citizens, what do you think the plan is for these British? What are they gonna do? They're just going to go from big city to big city to big city to big city and do the same thing to teach these American colonists, now their own country, this United States of America, a lesson. And their plan was to go take Washington, D.C., do what they did to D.C., then go to Baltimore, then go to Philadelphia, and then go to New York City. That was their plan of action. They were going to assault the nation's capital, then they were going to go to Baltimore, then they were going to go to Philadelphia, and then they were going to go to New York City and raise Cain in all of those major cities to set an example and to punish these Americans. That was their plan. Okay?
What was the second one?
Okay, the British plan during the War of 1812 would be to take Washington, D.C., then go to Baltimore, Maryland, then to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and then to New York City in New York. Washington, D.C., Baltimore, Philadelphia, New York City. Would that not put the entire American government in chaos? Oh, it absolutely would. That was their plan. So, their next place to go is Baltimore. And in order to capture Baltimore, they're going to have to capture a protective garrison in Baltimore Harbor known as Fort